there were a couple places I saw it recommended, then I heard about it, and I was like, oh, I'm going to watch it. On HBO Max, Six Schizophrenic Brothers.
Oh, I heard about this.
Oy, oy, oy. It's another one. Like, you got to be in the right mood for this. I mean, it's a lot. So
Can I watch the dramatized version with, like, Ryan Reynolds playing, like, 8 characters? Or what was the could we just get, like, Hitman and get, like, those different characters? We don't actually need 7, 60. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say this would be hard to take into the scripted zone because it is so almost unbelievable and also just so sad. So this family, the parents Dawn and Mimi Galvin, basically he's in the military and they get assigned to Colorado Springs, which immediately sort of off-puts the mom because she was a woman that enjoyed culture and society, and she felt that none of that existed in Colorado Springs.
Okay.
But military, you get assigned where you're going to get assigned, and that's it. They go on to have 12 kids.
That's a lot.
Right. And 6 of the boys were then afflicted with schizophrenia. And, schizophrenia for young males usually comes in late teens, early 20s. A lot of times they go off to college, they're by themselves, and they start acting erratic, so on and so forth. That because they're unchecked and maybe don't have the routine and certain things that maybe kept them, you didn't notice, even though their behavior at times was really inappropriate or off the charts. You're like, well, okay, the family structure could keep it more in line. You go off to college, and that's why a lot of times this happens. So, and they were all athletes and, picture perfect. I mean, they'd all be dressed beautifully, all lined up, and you just think, but, we, having grown up in a household, 8 kids, there are elements of it. I was like, yeah, you cannot keep track of 12 kids as a mom. It's physically impossible. And she had very high expectations of what was like the cleanliness of the house and how they were to behave, which you're like, you had 12 kids. It's that's insane. So through that process, they talk about the 6 sons that were afflicted and basically were diagnosed with schizophrenia at varying ages. One was like as young as 14, which is awful, and how they would act out. A lot of it was violence, whether against each other or other people. And what happened to the 6 brothers.
When is this taking place? Is this a current thing that happened?
No. The family originally was like the 1960s into the 70s and things like that.
Oh, okay.
But now they are interviewing them. Primarily one of the sisters. There's only 2 daughters. 10, the rest are all boys.
Oh, wow.
And the daughters are the last 2 kids. So one of the daughters does participate, and she breaks your heart. She's taken on, the mother basically cursed her, like, please watch after the boys.
Oh, geez.
You're like, girl, oh God, break free of this curse, basically.
So how old are they all?
They all appear to be like in their late 50s to 70s if they're still alive.
Okay, that makes sense.
Most of them, more than half the family is gone.
Oof.
And it talks about the nature versus nurture of schizophrenia. It talks about certain factors and trauma that can play into it.
Wow.
And they look back at some of the boys like, oh, one of the boys got in a fight with the younger one and caused a severe brain trauma. And basically did that trigger his schizophrenia. So there's just elements like that. And the nurture element, they look back at the mom and they're like, some of her behavior, now we look back at it through a different lens, she might have had some mental health issues that were undiagnosed. And so it's heartbreaking. Another one, I'm like, I don't really feel like there's a happy ending in the end. It was like,
when do you watch these things that you're okay to be like, I can watch these really dark, heavy documentaries? Do you watch them during the day? When do you?
Yes, during the day. And one of the things that, because they all basically went through the same facility in Colorado, there's DNA that they are now studying from all these boys to try to understand schizophrenia and the nature versus, and they all had something in their DNA sequence like, oh, that's different. Okay. All 6 of those had that.
I don't know where we're at in the world of schizophrenia. Do we feel like it is a genetic disorder that is passed down in families? It feels like that's part of what happens.
That's what they're studying to try to understand. It's so rare that in one family, half the family is afflicted by this.
Wow.
So it's like they're quote like the most mentally ill family in like history. So, and what it did to the other siblings to basically grow up in this cacophony of, because the oldest son, Don, comes back and basically lives with the family. And, so one of the younger daughters ends up just moving out with another family. Another daughter, there is sexual abuse, not by Don, but another brother. There's just so many elements. You're like, Oh my gosh. So I guess the hope of it in the end is that the DNA testing and things can be learned from them.
Yeah.
And then the one sister who basically has overseen the brothers and tried to kind of keep them, in check or at least being taken care of to some degree. But they were interviewed and they're like all still very mentally ill, even though they'll say like, oh, I'm cured. That's not anything I've got to worry about anymore.
Oof.
No. She has a son, and it talks about, then you kind of think about the nurture, because she's had these brothers, she's talked about, they've been so impactful in her life, the boys, the brothers, that her son has just felt like he's had this cloud curse over his whole life. Like,
oh, wow.
He goes, basically, when I turn 26 years old, I'll feel like the luckiest guy alive if I haven't become, diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Oh, wow.
And you're like, okay, maybe that should have been handled differently. I don't know.
Yeah.
But she was so trying to take care of the brothers because her mom told her to, that he was exposed to them and he heard probably way too much about them for his young, impressionable brain. And you're like, and so my hope, my prayer is that young kid, even if he is diagnosed, navigates it differently than his uncles. But the real prayer would be that he does not get diagnosed with it. So it's a fascinating documentary. It is 4 parts, and it's available on HBO Max.
So it's sort of a series. I mean, it's not just like a one documentary movie. It's multiple parts.
It's 4 episodes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. All right. Okay, on that note, Ed, what else you got?
Real uplifting documentary
I
recommendation.
know, Liz. I'm worried for you. How are you
Sorry.
watching these and then be like happy and okay?
Interesting, because I'm for sure not going to pick either one of those up. I appreciate that. I've seen the title of the Six Schizophrenic Brothers. I'm like, I got 2. We're halfway there. Let's not even figure out.
What?
I'm the third of the 3 brothers. There's 6. I don't even want to know what our odds are.